The sound of a rifle cocking echoed through the dusty afternoon air as Savannah Blackstone stared down the barrel of her own brother's Winchester. It was 1878 in the Montana Territory, and at 22 years old, she had just been informed her future had been sold to the highest bidder, a man 30 years her senior with 3 dead wives already buried. "You cannot be serious, Thomas," Savannah said, her fingers clutching the porch railing of their modest ranch house. "I will not marry Mr. Peterson." Thomas Blackstone lowered his rifle but kept his stance rigid, his face flushed with anger beneath his wide-brimmed hat. At 29, he had taken over the family ranch after their parents' deaths 2 years prior, and the responsibility had hardened him in ways Savannah barely recognized. "The arrangement is already made. The ranch is drowning in debt. Peterson has agreed to absorb it all for your hand. You'll be comfortable, which is more than I can promise you here." Thomas adjusted his gun belt, avoiding her eyes. "He arrives in 3 days for the ceremony." Savannah felt as though the ground beneath her boots had turned to quicksand. 3 days? You made this decision without even telling me." "It wasn't a decision, Savannah. It was a necessity." Thomas turned to walk away, signaling the end of the conversation. "Start packing your things." That night, Savannah couldn't sleep. The thought of being handed over like cattle at auction made her stomach turn. The moon hung high and full over the Montana landscape as she slipped from her bed, dressed quickly, and grabbed the small leather pouch containing her mother's locket and the meager savings she'd managed to hide away. If Thomas thought she would accept this fate without a fight, he didn't know his sister at all. Dawn was still hours away when Savannah saddled her mare, Willow, and rode away from the only home she'd ever known. The night air bit at her cheeks as she urged her horse faster, heading toward the town of Silver Creek, 15 miles to the east. She had a friend there, Martha, who worked at the local hotel. Perhaps she could hide there until she figured out her next move. The journey took longer than expected, with Savannah forced to take cover twice when she heard riders approaching on the main trail. By the time she reached Silver Creek, the first hints of daylight were painting the horizon, and exhaustion had settled deep in her bones. Martha's reaction to Savannah's predicament was one of horror followed by resolve. "You can stay with me for a spell, but your brother knows we're friends. This'll be the first place he looks." "I just need a day or two to think," Savannah said, gratefully accepting the coffee Martha offered. "Well, thinking won't change the fact that Thomas has the law on his side as your guardian," Martha replied grimly. "Peterson has the mayor and half the territory officials in his pocket. If you're truly looking to escape this, you need to get farther than Silver Creek." "Where would I go? I have no family elsewhere." Martha's expression softened. "The morning stage to Helena leaves in 2 hours. My cousin works at a dress shop there. I could write you a letter of introduction." Helena was nearly 100 miles away. It might as well have been the moon. But the thought of being Mrs. Peterson by weeks steeled Savannah's resolve. "I'll take it." 2 hours later, Savannah stood beside the stagecoach, her small bag clutched in trembling hands, Martha's letter tucked safely inside her coat pocket. Her mare had been sold to a local livery for enough money to buy the stage ticket and leave a little extra for food. "Stage to Helena. All aboard," the driver called. As Savannah moved to climb in, a commotion erupted at the far end of the street. 3 riders were galloping into town, and even at a distance, she recognized her brother's distinctive silhouette. "Thomas," she whispered, her heart lurching into her throat. "Hurry," Martha urged, practically shoving her toward the coach. But it was too late. Thomas had spotted her and was closing the distance rapidly, his 2 ranch hands flanking him. "Savannah Blackstone," he bellowed, bringing his horse to a sliding stop that sent dust billowing across the street. "Get away from that coach." The few townsfolk present scattered, none willing to get involved in what was clearly a family dispute. The stage driver looked nervously between Savannah and the angry man on horseback. "I'm leaving, Thomas," Savannah called back, trying to keep her voice steady. "I won't be sold like cattle." Thomas dismounted in one fluid motion, striding toward her with purpose. "You're being childish. Peterson is offering us salvation. He's offering you salvation. He's offering me a prison." "Miss," the stage driver interrupted, "I need to depart. Are you coming or staying?" Before Savannah could answer, a deep voice cut through the tension. "The lady said she's leaving." All eyes turned to the tall figure stepping out from the saloon across the street. Savannah recognized him immediately. Ryker Young, one of the most respected ranch hands in the territory. She'd seen him occasionally in town, had even danced with him once at last year's harvest festival. At 26, he had already earned a reputation as a skilled horseman and an honest worker. Thomas scowled. "Stay out of this, Young. This is family business." Ryker crossed the street with an unhurried stride that somehow conveyed more authority than Thomas's bluster. His dark hair was partially hidden beneath a worn Stetson, and his blue eyes remained fixed on Thomas as he positioned himself between Savannah and her brother. When a man forces his sister into marriage against her will, it becomes everybody's business, Ryker stated, his voice low but carrying in the morning stillness. Thomas's hand drifted toward his gun. "She has obligations to this family. Peterson's offer is an insult to your sister's worth," Ryker interrupted. "Selling her future to pay your debts? That's not protection, Blackstone. That's cowardice." The words struck Thomas like physical blows. His face contorted with rage. "Who the hell do you think you are? Someone who believes a woman should choose her own path." Ryker's stance remained relaxed, but Savannah could see the readiness in him, the coiled tension beneath the calm exterior. Thomas drew his gun, and the street went silent. "Step aside, Young." "Thomas, no," Savannah cried. Ryker didn't flinch. "Think carefully about what happens next, Blackstone. Even if you shoot me, your sister's made her choice clear. You planning to drag her back home at gunpoint too?" The standoff stretched for what felt like an eternity. Finally, the town sheriff emerged from his office, summoned by the commotion. "What's going on here?" Sheriff Miller demanded, his hand resting on his own weapon. "My sister is being willful, Sheriff," Thomas said, not lowering his gun. "I'm taking her home." The sheriff assessed the situation with experienced eyes. "Miss Blackstone, is your brother forcing you to go somewhere against your will?" Savannah straightened her shoulders. "He's trying to force me to marry Mr. Peterson to pay off the ranch debts. I'm 22 years old, Sheriff. I should have a say in who I marry." The sheriff nodded slowly. "She's of age, Blackstone. You can't force her. She's under my guardianship." "Not anymore, she ain't," the sheriff interrupted. "Not at 22. Now lower that weapon before I have to take it from you." The defeat in Thomas's eyes was almost painful to witness as he slowly holstered his gun. "Savannah, please. The ranch. Our parents' legacy." "I'm sorry about the ranch," she said softly, "but I won't sacrifice my life for it." Thomas's jaw tightened. He turned to Ryker with undisguised contempt. "You think you're being noble? You have no idea what you're getting into." "Maybe not," Ryker replied evenly. "But it seems the lady deserves better than being traded like a commodity." Thomas spat in the dirt at Ryker's feet before turning back to his horse. "You've made your choice, Savannah. Don't come crawling back when this falls apart." With that, he mounted up and rode out of town, his men following closely behind. The silence that followed was broken by the stage driver clearing his throat. "We really need to get moving, miss." Savannah hesitated, looking from the coach to Ryker. She'd been so focused on escape that she hadn't thought beyond getting to Helena. Now, with Thomas's threat hanging in the air, she wondered if running was truly her best option. As if reading her thoughts, Ryker spoke. "You don't have to leave. Not unless you want to." "I can't stay here," Savannah replied. "Thomas will just come back with Peterson." Ryker nodded thoughtfully. "I work for the Rockingham Ranch, just west of here. Mrs. McAllister is always looking for help with the household. It's good, honest work, and you'd be safe there." Savannah considered his offer. The Rockingham was one of the largest operations in the territory, owned by a widow who had successfully maintained the ranch after her husband's death. "Why would you help me?" "Because no one should be forced into a life they don't want," Ryker answered simply. "And because I'd be a poor excuse for a man if I stood by and watched it happen." There was something in his direct gaze that made Savannah believe him. She turned to the stage driver. "I'm sorry for the delay, but I won't be going to Helena today." The driver nodded, looking relieved to be moving on from the drama. Ryker offered a slight smile. "I've got my wagon at the livery. I'm heading back to the ranch once I finish my errands in town. You're welcome to ride along." 2 hours later, Savannah sat beside Ryker on the wagon bench as they traveled the dusty road toward the Rockingham. The morning sun had burned away the chill, and Savannah found herself stealing glances at the man beside her. His profile was strong, his hands sure on the reins as he guided the team of horses with practiced ease. Thank you, she said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. You didn't have to stand up for me back there. Some things a man just has to do, Ryker replied, his eyes remaining on the road ahead. Your brother had no right. Thomas wasn't always like this, Savannah said, feeling a need to explain. After our parents died in that fever 2 years ago, the responsibility of the ranch. It changed him. The drought last summer nearly ruined us, and the bank has been threatening foreclosure. Ryker nodded. Hard times can reveal a man's true character. Some rise to meet challenges honorably. Others look for shortcuts, no matter the cost to others. His words held no judgment, just a simple truth that made Savannah look at her situation with clearer eyes. Thomas had chosen an easy path at her expense rather than facing their problems head-on. I don't know what Mrs. McAllister will say about taking me in, she admitted. Ryker's mouth curved into a half-smile. Margaret McAllister respects grit and determination. I suspect you two will get along just fine. The Rockingham Ranch came into view as they crested a small rise, a sprawling collection of well-maintained buildings nestled in a verdant valley, with cattle grazing on the surrounding hillsides. It was easily 5 times the size of the Blackstone Ranch, a testament to generations of careful management. As they approached the main house, Savannah's nervousness returned. What if Mrs. McAllister turned her away? What if Thomas showed up here with Peterson? They were met in the yard by a stout woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her sharp eyes took in Savannah's presence with evident curiosity. Ryker Young, I don't recall sending you to town for anything but supplies, she said, though her tone held more amusement than censure. Ryker stepped down from the wagon and extended a hand to help Savannah. Mrs. McAllister, this is Miss Savannah Blackstone. She's in need of employment and a safe place to stay. Savannah stepped forward, determined to speak for herself. I can cook, clean, and sew, madam. I'm a hard worker. Margaret McAllister studied her with the appraising eye of someone who had spent a lifetime judging horseflesh and cattle. Blackstone. Thomas Blackstone's sister? Yes, madam. And why aren't you at your brother's ranch where you belong? Savannah swallowed hard. My brother arranged for me to marry Mr. Peterson to settle the ranch debts. I refused. Understanding dawned in Margaret's eyes. Elias Peterson? The land speculator. Yes, madam. Margaret's expression hardened. That man has foreclosed on more family ranches than I can count, usually after the owner mysteriously dies and the widow can't manage the payments. She glanced at Ryker. And you got involved in this how exactly? Ryker removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. Just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Margaret's shrewd gaze moved between the two of them before she seemed to come to a decision. Well, Miss Blackstone, as it happens, my housekeeper left last month to get married. The position is yours if you want it, room, board, and fair wages. Relief washed over Savannah. Thank you, Mrs. McAllister. I won't disappoint you. See that you don't, Margaret replied briskly. Ryker, show her to the housekeeper's quarters, then get those supplies unloaded. We've got a ranch to run. As they walked toward a neat cottage situated behind the main house, Ryker smiled down at her. Told you she'd take to you. I think she took pity on me, Savannah corrected. Margaret McAllister doesn't do pity, Ryker countered. She does respect. And she respects someone willing to stand up for themselves, even when it's hard. The cottage was small but clean, with a bedroom, sitting area, and a small kitchen. It was more privacy than Savannah had ever had, and the thought of having a space truly her own brought unexpected tears to her eyes. I'll leave you to get settled, Ryker said, setting her bag on the small table. Dinner's at 6 in the main house. The crew eats together. Ryker, Savannah called as he reached the door. I don't know how I'll ever repay you for what you did today. He turned back, his expression earnest. Live the life you choose, not the one someone else chooses for you. That'll be payment enough. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that brought Savannah more contentment than she'd known since before her parents' deaths. The work was demanding, managing the household, cooking alongside the ranch's cook for a crew of 15 men, mending, cleaning, but it was honest work that allowed her to hold her head high. Mrs. McAllister proved to be a fair employer who valued efficiency and initiative, and the two women developed a mutual respect that sometimes bordered on friendship. Ryker kept a respectful distance, but Savannah often caught him watching her from across the dining room or the yard. Their conversations, though brief, grew increasingly comfortable, revealing a shared love of books, music, and the vast Montana landscape that surrounded them. One evening, nearly a month after her arrival, Savannah was hanging laundry when Ryker approached, leading his horse. "Heading out?" she asked, noting his packed saddlebags. "Cattle drive to the north pasture. I'll be gone a few days." He hesitated, then added, "I wanted to let you know that your brother was in town yesterday." Savannah's hands stilled on the damp sheet she was hanging. "Did he say anything?" "Not to me directly, but word is Peterson's still pushing for the marriage. Thomas has been telling folks you're just being stubborn, that you'll come around." "I won't," she said firmly. "I know that," Ryker replied with a small smile. "Just thought you should be prepared in case he shows up here." "Thank you for the warning." Ryker shifted his weight, seemingly reluctant to leave. "Savannah, when I get back, would you consider taking a ride with me on Sunday? There's a spot up in the foothills I'd like to show you." The invitation caught her by surprise, sending a flutter through her chest that had nothing to do with anxiety. "I'd like that." His smile widened, transforming his usually serious face. "I'll look forward to it, then." Savannah watched him ride away, a warmth spreading through her that had been absent for too long. For the first time since leaving home, she allowed herself to consider possibilities beyond mere survival. 2 days later, Thomas arrived at the Rockingham. Savannah was in the kitchen, kneading bread dough, when she heard the commotion in the yard. Through the window, she saw her brother dismounting, his expression thunderous as he approached the main house. Mrs. McAllister intercepted him before he reached the porch. "Mr. Blackstone, what brings you to my property?" "I've come for my sister," Thomas replied loudly enough for Savannah to hear through the open window. "This has gone on long enough." "Miss Blackstone is employed here," Margaret replied coolly. "She's an adult, free to work where she chooses." "She's being foolish. Peterson's offer won't stand forever." "Good," Margaret retorted. "Because that man is a vulture, and you're a fool for dealing with him." Thomas's face flushed with anger. "This isn't your concern, Mrs. McAllister. When you come onto my land making demands, it becomes my concern." Savannah wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside, unwilling to let Margaret fight her battles. "Hello, Thomas." Her brother turned to her, relief momentarily softening his features before hardening again. "Pack your things, Savannah. We're leaving." "No, we're not," she replied steadily. "I'm staying here. Peterson is waiting. He's willing to overlook your defiance if you come home now." "How generous of him," Savannah said dryly. "My answer is still no." Thomas stepped toward her, lowering his voice. "The ranch is weeks away from foreclosure. Is that what you want? For our parents' legacy to be lost?" "Our parents would never have wanted me to sacrifice my happiness for land," Savannah countered. "They taught us that family takes care of each other, not uses each other." "You ungrateful." "That's enough," Margaret interrupted. "Mr. Blackstone, you've delivered your message, and you've received your answer. Now I suggest you leave my property before I have my men escort you off." Thomas glared at the older woman, then back at Savannah. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Savannah replied firmly. "Goodbye, Thomas." She watched him ride away, sadness mingling with her relief. The brother she had known and loved seemed lost to her now, replaced by a desperate man who had forgotten what truly mattered. "You handled that well," Margaret observed once Thomas was out of sight. "I learned from watching you," Savannah replied with a small smile. Margaret chuckled. "Well, I suspect this won't be the last we see of him. But for now, we have work to do." The cattle drive returned 3 days later, and with it, Ryker. Savannah found herself watching for him from the window as the men rode in, dusty and tired from their journey. When their eyes met across the yard, his weary expression transformed into a smile that made her heart skip. Sunday dawned clear and crisp, perfect for the ride Ryker had proposed. Savannah dressed with extra care, selecting a blue riding skirt that complemented her eyes and arranging her honey blonde hair in a practical but becoming style. They rode for nearly an hour, climbing steadily into the foothills that bordered the eastern edge of the Rockingham. Ryker was an easy companion, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his 8 years working on various ranches throughout the territory. "How did you end up at the Rockingham?" Savannah asked as they followed a narrow trail through a stand of pines. Mr. McAllister hired me when I was 18, Ryker explained. I'd been drifting, taking whatever work I could find. He saw something in me worth investing in, taught me everything about ranching. When he died 4 years ago, Mrs. McAllister asked me to stay on as foreman. She trusts you a great deal. Ryker nodded. Trust goes both ways. She could have sold the ranch after he died. Plenty of offers came in. But she held on, kept the crew together, even expanded operations. She's a remarkable woman. Yes, she is, Savannah agreed, thinking of how Margaret had stood up to Thomas without hesitation. They emerged from the trees onto a high meadow that opened to reveal a breathtaking vista of the valley below. The Rockingham spread out like a patchwork quilt, cattle dotting the pastures like tiny specks, the buildings clustered in the center like a miniature town. It's beautiful, Savannah breathed, reining her horse to a stop beside Ryker's. This is where I come when I need to think, Ryker said, dismounting and helping Savannah down. Sometimes the answers look clearer from up here. They spread a blanket in the lush grass, sharing the picnic lunch Savannah had packed. As they ate, Ryker asked about her life before coming to the Rockingham, her childhood, her parents, her dreams for the future. I always thought I'd marry someone from around Silver Creek, raise a family on land nearby, Savannah admitted. After my parents died, those dreams seemed to die too. Thomas became so focused on saving the ranch that everything else fell away. And now? Ryker asked, his blue eyes intent on hers. What do you dream of now? Savannah considered the question, realizing that for the first time in years, she felt free to dream again. A life of my own choosing. Work that matters. People who see me for who I am, not what I can do for them. Ryker's smile was warm. Those sound like worthy dreams. What about you? Savannah asked. What does Ryker Young dream of? He looked out over the valley, thoughtful. For a long time, it was just about proving I could make something of myself. My father was a drifter who never stayed in one place long enough for roots to grow. I wanted something different: stability, respect, purpose. His gaze returned to her face. Lately, I've been thinking about more. More? A home of my own. Someone to share it with. His voice softened. Someone like you, Savannah. The directness of his words sent warmth flooding through her. Ryker, I know it hasn't been long, he continued quickly. And I'm not asking for promises. But I want you to know that I admired you from the moment you stood up to your brother in town. That admiration has only grown these past weeks. Savannah found herself moving closer to him on the blanket, drawn by the honesty in his expression. I admire you too, she said softly. Your kindness, your strength, the way you treat others with respect. Ryker reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. May I kiss you, Savannah Blackstone? Her answer was to close the distance between them herself, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that began tentatively, but quickly deepened into something that made her dizzy with newfound emotion. When they finally broke apart, Ryker's eyes were bright with feeling. I've been wanting to do that since the moment I helped you down from that wagon. Savannah laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. I believe I've been waiting for you to do it just as long. The remainder of the afternoon passed in a sweet haze of conversation, more kisses, and the gradual unfolding of hopes and dreams that seemed more possible with each passing hour. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they reluctantly packed up to return to the ranch. The peaceful mood was shattered the moment they rode into the ranch yard. A group of riders was gathered there. Thomas, Peterson, and four men Savannah didn't recognize. There she is, Peterson announced, his jolly face twisting into what he probably thought was a charming smile. At 52, Elias Peterson was a substantial man whose wealth hadn't brought him grace or genuine goodwill. My wayward bride returns. Ryker's body tensed beside her, but his voice remained calm. Miss Blackstone isn't going anywhere she doesn't want to go. Peterson's smile disappeared. This doesn't concern you, Young. The lady and I have an arrangement. No, we don't, Savannah stated clearly, dismounting from her horse. I never agreed to marry you, Mr. Peterson. Your brother agreed on your behalf, Peterson replied, as if that settled the matter. My brother had no right to make such promises. Thomas stepped forward, his expression a mix of anger and pleading. Savannah, please. Peterson has the deed to our ranch. If you don't honor this agreement, we lose everything. So you sold the ranch to him already? Savannah asked, realization dawning. When? Thomas looked away. Last week. He's giving us 30 days to vacate, unless the marriage takes place. You're unbelievable, Savannah whispered. You sold our home without even telling me, and now you're trying to use that to force me into marriage. It's a fair arrangement, Peterson interjected. You'll want for nothing as my wife, and your brother can stay on as ranch manager. The arrangement is coercion, Ryker said, moving to stand beside Savannah. And it ends now. Peterson's eyes narrowed. Young, you're interfering in business that doesn't concern you. Her choice is already me, Ryker replied steadily. And I won't stand by while you try to bully her into something she doesn't want. The tension in the yard was palpable. Savannah could see Peterson's men shifting, hands moving toward weapons. The confrontation was spiraling toward violence. Enough! Margaret McAllister's authoritative voice cut through the standoff as she strode from the main house, rifle in hand. Elias Peterson, I thought I smelled something foul on my property. Peterson turned, his face reddening at the insult. Margaret, still playing at being a rancher, I see. Not playing, succeeding, she retorted. Which is more than I can say for the men who sell their souls or their sisters to you. This is a private matter, not on my land. It isn't, Margaret interrupted. Miss Blackstone works for me. She stays or goes as she pleases, not as you demand. Peterson's expression turned calculating. The girl's brother owes me a bride or the immediate vacation of his property. One way or another, I'll collect what I'm owed. Then I suggest you look elsewhere for payment, Margaret replied coldly. Because if you or your men make one move toward Miss Blackstone, you'll be leaving here with more holes than you arrived with. As if to emphasize her point, several Rockingham ranch hands appeared, all armed and positioned strategically around the yard. Peterson assessed the situation, clearly unwilling to risk open conflict against such odds. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Ryker stated, his hand finding Savannah's and holding it firmly. Miss Blackstone has made her choice. And it isn't you. Peterson's gaze dropped to their joined hands, his face darkening with understanding. So that's how it is. The girl's found herself a cowboy. The woman, Savannah corrected firmly, has found herself a good man who respects her choices. Peterson turned to Thomas. Your sister's a fool, Blackstone, and you'll both regret this decision. With that, he wheeled his horse around and rode out, his men following closely behind. Thomas remained, looking lost, and suddenly much younger than his 29 years. Savannah, please, he began. Go home, Thomas, she said quietly. What's left of it, anyway? For a moment, it seemed he might argue further, but instead, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I was trying to save what Pa built. At the cost of my life, Savannah replied. That's not what Pa would have wanted, and you know it. Thomas nodded slowly, the truth of her words finally seeming to penetrate. I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me. Not today, Savannah agreed. But someday, perhaps. After Thomas rode away, the ranch hands dispersed, and Margaret retreated to the house, leaving Savannah and Ryker standing alone in the yard, their hands still joined. Are you all right? Ryker asked gently. Savannah considered the question. Yes, she said, realizing it was true. For the first time in a long while, I truly am. Ryker's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. What you said to Peterson? About finding a good man. Savannah smiled up at him. I meant every word. In that case, Ryker said, his expression growing serious. I should tell you that I'm falling in love with you, Savannah Blackstone. And while I know it's too soon to ask for promises, I hope you'll give me the chance to prove myself worthy of your choice. Savannah reached up to touch his face, marveling at how clear her path now seemed when just weeks ago it had been shrouded in uncertainty. You already have, Ryker Young, and I'm falling in love with you too. His kiss was a promise of respect, of partnership, of a future built on mutual choice rather than obligation. 6 months later, on a perfect spring day in 1879, Savannah Blackstone became Savannah Young in a simple ceremony on the same meadow where they had shared their first kiss. Margaret McAllister hosted the celebration at the ranch, and even Thomas attended, his tentative steps toward reconciliation met with cautious acceptance from his sister. Peterson had indeed foreclosed on the Blackstone ranch, but But the land speculators' influence in the territory had waned considerably after Margaret McAllister publicly revealed his pattern of predatory lending and suspicious deaths of former property owners. An investigation by territorial authorities had followed, resulting in charges that would keep Peterson occupied in court for years to come. As the sun set on their wedding day, Ryker led Savannah to the small house he had spent months building on land purchased from Mrs. McAllister, a cozy two-bedroom structure with a wide porch and windows positioned to capture both the sunrise and sunset. "Welcome home, Mrs. Young," he said, lifting her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. Savannah wrapped her arms around his neck, her heart full to bursting. "It's perfect. Everything I never dared to dream of." Later, as they lay in each other's arms in the quiet darkness of their new home, Savannah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The fear and desperation of that morning in Silver Creek seemed like a lifetime ago. "What are you thinking about?" Ryker asked, his fingers gently combing through her hair. "About choices," she replied. "How one decision can change everything. Riding away from your brother that morning?" "That," Savannah agreed. "And your decision to stand between us. To give me the chance to choose my own path." Ryker pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Best decision I ever made." "Mine too," Savannah whispered, settling into the embrace of the man who had given her not a convenient arrangement, but a love built on respect, choice, and the promise of a future they would shape together. In the years that followed, the Young family prospered. Ryker's skill with horses and cattle, combined with Savannah's sharp mind for business, eventually allowed them to purchase additional land and establish a breeding program that became renowned throughout the territory. Their home expanded to accommodate 3 children, 2 boys, and a girl who grew up knowing the value of making their own choices and respecting the choices of others. And on each anniversary, no matter how busy the ranch became, Ryker and Savannah would ride to their special meadow, spread a blanket in the grass, and remind each other of the day when a stubborn woman and a principled cowboy had declared that love, true love, could only exist when freely chosen.